Open the champagne, pop the cork. The Senate Democrat leader and the Republican leader are on their way to Kiev. They've got $60 billion they're bringing. I don't know if it'll be cash in pallets, but they're taking your money to Kiev. A literal invasion's coming across our border. 800,000 people came illegally in the last month, and all they had time to do in the Senate was get the money, get the cash pallets, load the planes, get the champagne ready, and fly to Kiev. In what kind of world do you borrow money to send charity? The leadership in the Republican Party is really not a great deal. And this is a secret you're not supposed to expose in Washington, but there's not a lot of difference between the Democrat leadership and the Republican leadership. 500,000 people have died. It's at a standstill. Some towns in Ukraine, you can't find young people anymore. They're either dead or have gone off to Europe to avoid the war. So Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, fired his major general because the major general admitted the truth, which is this is at a stalemate. Open the champagne, pop the cork. The Senate Democrat leader and the Republican leader are on their way to Kiev. They've got $60 billion they're bringing. I don't know if it'll be cash in pallets, but they're taking your money to Kiev. Now, they didn't have much time, really no time and no money to do anything about our border. We're being invaded. A literal invasion's coming across our border. 800,000 people came illegally in the last month, and all they had time to do in the Senate was get the money, get the cash pallets, load the planes, get the champagne ready, and fly to Kiev. On Friday, they will take the $60 billion to Kiev, crack the champagne, and meanwhile, each day, between 5,000 to 10,000 people come across the border illegally. Now, they put up a sham bill, and they said, you should have taken the sham bill. You should have taken the ruse. We gave you a border bill. But the border bill would allow 5,000 people a day to come across, and then they would declare an emergency. Guess what? The emergency is already here. 700,000 people in 2 months is an emergency. Nearly 800,000 people in 2 months is an emergency. But they gave lie to the ruse when they tweeted out their great bullet points on how great this deal was going to be. They tweeted out, the border never closes. So they were putting forward this great border bill that the president would use to stop illegal immigration, but they tweeted out of all the main points that this would do, that the border never closes. And this is actually true, because what would happen is they would close the illegal crossings, but leave the legal crossings open. It's like, why wouldn't we have the illegal crossing always closed? Why wouldn't we, after having 750,000 people come in illegally, close down the illegal crossings immediately? And what also gives lie to their assertions is that we have the same laws we had under President Trump. And President Trump controlled the border. So how could President Trump do it with the same set of laws? And now they say, if you only gave us power, we would do something. But what gives lie to this assertion is that they're in court every day trying to dismantle the barriers that Texas puts up. Texas and 30-some-odd Republican governors have said enough's enough. They put cargo containers and razor wire on the border to say no more illegal crossings. So the Biden administration, who says just give us more power and we'll do something about the border, went all the way to the Supreme Court to get the power, and they have it temporarily. They may not keep it, but they have fought tooth and nail to remove the cargo containers, remove the razor wire, remove the border barriers. So which is it? They want more power to shut down the illegal immigration, or they want to remove the border obstacles to illegal immigration. They can't have it both ways. Now, some would argue, well, this appears to be that you don't want immigrants in your country. Nothing could be further from the truth. We admit 1 million immigrants to our country every year, and I'm for that. In fact, I'm co-sponsor of a half a dozen bills to increase lawful immigration. I think it would be difficult for America to do a lot of things, including building houses, apartments, and commercial construction, without new people coming to the country. I think some of the best Americans just got here. Many of them are my friends. Bowling Green, Kentucky is known for people from all over the world. We have 100 languages being spoken in our schools. This has nothing to do with not wanting immigrants. It has to do with not wanting 750,000 people to come across who we don't know who they are. Most of them are males of a military age, and we're doing nothing. So we come to an inflection point. That's where we are, an inflection point. And we had a chance. 41 of us, 41 Republicans could have stood and said, no, we want something better. There's an emergency on the border, and we will not settle for anything until we get a border security bill. Instead, it folded. Why? Because Republican leadership is flying with the Democrat leadership to Kiev because they have prioritized Ukraine over the southern border. There's no other way to put it. We have a disaster at our southern border, and the ranking Republicans and the ranking Democrats, there is no difference. They're on the same team. They'll be on the same plane to Kiev. Republicans and Democrats, same plane, pallets of cash, your money to Ukraine. Even if you could make the argument, and I think there is an argument that there is a noble cause, that these people are fighting for their independence and they're fighting against aggression. All of that is true, but there is no money to give them. We're out. We are flat out of cash. Not only are we flat out of cash, we're $34 trillion in the hole. We're borrowing money like it's going out of style. In what kind of world do you borrow money to send charity? If you see a homeless person and you want to help them, but you have no money, would you go to the first corner and go into the bank and say, I want to help homeless people. Will you give me $1,000 so I can help homeless people? No one does that. Now, I've often asked the question, couldn't we maybe set priorities? And if you really believe that Ukraine is part of our national security, which is ludicrous, but if you believe that, maybe the money should come out of the defense budget. If this is truly, if defending Ukraine is defending our country, which is ludicrous, but if it were, we're at $880 billion in our military budget. This is more than the next 10 countries in NATO combined. If you really want to send your money to Ukraine, take it out of the military budget. But I think the American people ought to look at those here in this body who are willing to prioritize another country over our country. I think they need to look at that and decide, is this what you want? Is this what the American people really want? Did you elect these people to ignore the southern border and to send money to look at Ukraine's border? To prioritize Ukraine's border over the U.S. border, is that what you elected these people to do? And if you did, do you not care about the bankrupting of America? Do you not care about the destruction of the dollar? It's happening every day. It's happening sort of gradually, 5-10% a year of lost purchasing power. But there are people who are left behind, people whose salaries aren't adjusted with inflation, people who are being squeezed by this inflation. And people say, whose fault was the inflation? Republicans or Democrats? And I say both. Really, there is only one party when you get down to it. They all want to spend money. The leadership in the Republican Party is really not a great deal. And this is a secret you're not supposed to expose in Washington, but there's not a lot of difference between the Democrat leadership and the Republican leadership. They kind of want to spend money sometimes for different things. Sometimes the Republicans want to spend more on the military enterprise, and Democrats maybe more on welfare. But they get together. People say, oh, there's not enough compromise in Washington. There's way too much compromise. Why? They compromise to spend money we don't have. So in order to raise military spending, they got to promise that they'll raise the welfare spending as well. The head general in Ukraine has said that the war has come to a stalemate. And I'm the first to acknowledge look, the whole war was started by Russia. Russia's the aggressor. There is nothing good to be said about Putin doing this. He is the aggressor. He is in the wrong. But that doesn't really change the situation on the ground. It's at a standstill. 500,000 people have died. It's at a standstill. Some towns in Ukraine, you can't find young people anymore. They're either dead or have gone off to Europe to avoid the war. So Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, fired his major general because the major general admitted the truth, which is this is at a stalemate. See, you wonder how bad things are around here. We used to think $1 billion was a lot of time, a lot of money. But now we have trillion. We have trillion of $34 trillion. I remember when George W. Bush was president, it was $5 trillion, and it went to $10 trillion. I was like, gosh, this is terrible. This is a Republican administration. Then when Obama was president, it went from 10 to 20. Then when Trump was, it went up 7.5, 8 in 4 years, even at a more alarming rate. Each president's been worse. They've all been bad. Well, Congress deserves some of the blame, too. It doesn't happen without Congress, but the money's going crazy. But we're up to about $1.5 trillion. So I looked this up this morning. I wanted to know if you stacked $1 bills and you wanted to know how big 1.5 trillion is. Well, if you take 2 years worth of debt, that's $3 trillion, and you want it in $1 bills, the $1 bills would stack all the way to the moon, over 230,000 miles away. We're starting to talk about a bit of money here. But it's not just the overall debt. When they pay for the debt, the Federal Reserve dilutes the currency, and the currency becomes worth less and less. But also what happens is our interest rates increase over time. So under George W. Bush, we went from 5 to 10 trillion, and we doubled the debt from 5 to 10 trillion. In that period of time, the interest rate was cut in half, so interest rate really wasn't a lot worse. But we finally, I believe, have lost the ability for the Federal Reserve to suppress interest rates. Interest rates have risen, and interest payments have doubled. We're on course within the next year or so to have interest rates become the largest item, pushing out and crowding out other spending in the budget. Mark my words, this $100 billion will add to that problem, and I think is absolutely an utter mistake and an insult to every American that we ignore the invasion at our southern border in order to send money overseas.